This is the video that we're producing specifically where we're going to address case management, but many other subjects as well. My name is Michael Santos, and there are some people on here that work with our team. Many other people here are in different stages of the journey, and we just want to be able to provide as much information as we can, because we know how difficult it is for people going into the criminal justice system. We know that many people feel as though they should have never been been targeted by the criminal justice system, and instead this should have gone through the civil procedures, but we can't change that. And if your lawyer is helping you, we're glad. But we found while we were going through prison, there were many people whose lawyers weren't there to answer their questions after the sentencing hearing, or even up until the sentencing hearing. Our team at Prison Professors is very committed to saying we don't ever want anybody to say that about us. We want everybody to know that we are here with you from the time that you join our community until the time you are off of supervised release. And you can ask us any question at all. There's no question you can't ask us. I was incarcerated for 26 years and served that time in prisons of every security level. So I'm very committed to helping people prepare in every way possible, and so are my partners. So we've got a great team, and we want to make sure that you learn from our team, but that means everybody has to be doing a little bit of homework. Everybody should be spending time learning about how the system operates, because the system is very complicated and there are many parts of the system that are very difficult to understand. And if you don't understand the system well, you're not going to be able to seize every opportunity that can lead to or can influence when you come home. And just this morning, I'm going to share before I get into the formal webinar of where we're going through case management, I just want to give you an example of what I'm describing. So I'm going to share my screen. And if you look at my screen right here, right now, you will see the website. And this is the website that I really encourage people to look at regularly, because we publish content every day. You can just look at the dates. There's always new content on here. And sometimes it's even hard to keep up with all the information that we're publishing. But if you don't learn from this information, you're not going to know how to seize initiatives on what to do. Like, this is an article I wrote early this morning about a memorandum that came out, and I'm just going to describe what it's about. So in this memo here, there's not a video. I filmed the video and filmed in iTunes. It'll be up by later today, but I'm going to tell you what this is about. This relates directly to the First Step Act and a memorandum that came out yesterday that's kind of hard to understand. This memorandum, the Bureau of Prisons released to everybody in halfway houses. Scott, you're in a halfway house right now. Did you receive this? And you can unmute yourself. Did you receive this memorandum?
I did not. I'm actually on home confinement.
Okay, you may don't be surprised if you get this memorandum, because okay. I spoke with the previous director, who's one of our subject matter experts, and they said they released it to every halfway house in the system, and it went to people who are already on home confinement or on the halfway house. And basically, this memorandum is the kind of thing that we should expect with the Bureau of Prisons in this transition as they're trying to implement the First Step Act. And what it said and what it did was the First Step Act, of course, authorizes the Bureau of Prisons to reduce a person's prison sentence by up to 365 days. And it also, if depending on a person's sentence length or what they've earned in prison, it can increase the amount of time they have eligible to spend in a halfway house. But because they've been just kind of rolling this out slowly, it's been kind of following this path of, like, to use that cliche, is following a path of like building a plane while the plane is flying. So they're having to make adjustments all the time for more than 100,000 people that are serving time in federal prisons across America. And initially, they used this interim policy of applying earned time credits. Then they came up with an auto calculation policy. And when they came out with the auto calculation, I wouldn't even call it a policy, the auto calculation system, many people who are in the halfway house were getting news that they were in a halfway house too soon. And so there was this concern in the halfway house that they had told people that were already on home confinement or in a halfway house that they're going to have to go back to prison. Even some people who had received clemency got notification that they would have to go back to prison. So this memorandum that they published yesterday clarifies all of that. And it says, if you're already in a halfway house, disregard the auto calculation system because it's not going to apply to you. All that's doing is provides more confusion and challenges for people in prison. This is really makes it hard for people to prepare an effective release plan, because if you don't know when you're going to get out, you have a hard time. You've got anxiety, you've got stress, you're trying to make plans to get your career back on track, and you've got all these complexities. So what we want to do is make sure that you understand you should expect this kind of disappointment in the Bureau of Prisons. You should expect this kind of conflicting information, not only from people with whom you're serving time, not only from your lawyer, not only from probation officers or U.S. attorneys, but also from the system itself, the system that is tasked with the responsibility of carrying out a sentence after a judge says, I hereby sentence you to the custody of the Attorney General. So we want to help you understand, how do I navigate these complexities, and how do I position myself in such a way that I can get the benefit, the most benefit for me as an individual. And that means it's really important for people to understand, although you may have had a great attorney that helped you all the way through sentencing, many people, I might say, they didn't have that great attorney. What's going to happen is, once you get sentenced and you're in the Bureau of Prisons, no longer does your attorney matter at all. Everything matters what you do. You have to become a master of self-advocacy. And in order to become a master of self-advocacy, you've got to understand the system and what levers do I pull to get the outcome, the best outcome that I want. Because although we are going to be there to help you, to provide you with tools, tactics, and resources that you can use all the way through the journey, much of what happens, it directly relates to the decisions you make very early on during the journey. So we really want to help you understand that information, and we want to help you know where to get information if you're in there and you're facing a challenge. And that's why we hire formerly incarcerated people who've gone through the system, because they can help you find the assets and tools on our website once you're in there. When you're on a webinar like this, you can ask me anything, but this is really the only time that I'm available for one-on-one conversations. Of course, members of our team are available, but I'm not available because I'm working on other advocacy programs that I will share with you. But once you're in prison, you won't be able to participate on webinars. So we have this practice of writing content at scale that describes what's going on and what you can do about it. We send it to you through core links or through the regular mail. And when you respond, you can connect with other members of our team who will be monitoring those core links messages. And when they're monitoring the core links messages, they will respond to you, either telling you what they have learned, or if they say they don't know the answer to your specific question, they'll find the answer on our website and provide it to you, or they'll ask other members of our team. And we've got great members of our team who really we all have one goal in mind, and that's to help every person who's going through the system feel as if they have a resource and somebody that can provide answers. Either we can provide them directly from our own experience, or we can use our subject matter experts to say, hey, this is what we learned. Like, that's what I did this morning. As soon as I saw that memorandum that I just showed you, I sent a message out to the former director of the Bureau of Prisons, and I said, how do you interpret this memorandum that came out? Is the Bureau of Prisons going to change its 18-month rule on when they apply earned time credits? And he told me that may happen, but that's not what this memorandum is about. It was about correcting an error that the BOP previously sent out. And that's just something I want you to be aware of, because you're going to find a lot of that while you're going through prison. a lot of misinformation. We want you to know, how do you navigate that? And so now I'm going to turn to the webinar PowerPoint, which I created, and it's already on there. I received a message from somebody asking, where is the video from yesterday's webinar? You could always check them right here, because if you just go to the website itself, Prison Versus, of course, I will send out an email to everybody by tomorrow afternoon with links to both videos. But if you go to this blog right here, you'll see this is the webinar replay. So case management webinar, you can click right there. And on this webinar, you've got these links here that you could see. You could listen to it on iTunes. You could watch the YouTube video yesterday presentation. You could even download the PowerPoint that I used, and the PowerPoint is right here. So if anybody wants to follow along, because it's hard to read, I'm going to drop that in the chat right now. And there is the chat. There is the link to the page where I have the webinar. It's in the chat to everyone right now. But the first thing I want to talk about, and there's, the chat's not, this is the page itself. The PowerPoint is really not that sophisticated. It is just listing the bullet points that I really wanted to cover in prepared remarks during the first hour. But of course, I'm always available to respond to questions if anybody wants to unmute themselves, even if it's out of turn. But you can kind of scroll through the page if you'd like, and you can see what I'm going to cover. I'm going to cover unit management, staff hierarchy, release planning, counselors and case managers, progress reports, subject matter experts, advocacy, expect disappointment, and our commitment to help, and this importance that I'm going to conclude with about being both resilient, but also realistic about what's coming. And at the bottom, I have links to all of the areas here that I'm going to reference during today's webinar. So since I don't really need the webinar to be following the webinar, and it's not that comprehensive, I'm just going to look at the screen, because then I can see if somebody has their hand up. That's the only way I can see if you've got your hand up. So please feel free to break through and interrupt. In fact, before I get started on unit management, I know that Joseph had a question. Joseph, why don't you unmute yourself? And first of all, let the audience know about where you stand in the journey and what your experience is, and then give us your question.
So just waiting to be designated. I have a November 17th date. I was sentenced September 14th of this year. I pled guilty March 1st of this year. And my guidelines were 41 to 51 months. Did a great narrative with you guys. The narrative was outstanding. Justin prepared me for the PSR tremendously, and I kept studying on that. I updated the narrative as I went along 4 or 5 times with work that I was doing, with volunteer work that I was doing, getting certified. I also created the website with you guys, which is absolutely outstanding, and I love it. My lawyer actually put my website in the sentencing memorandum, and I'm sure the judge saw it, the U.S. Attorney's Office saw it, and probably even the FBI agent saw it. At sentencing, the judge read my narrative. She recognized the charitable work, the video that I did with prison professors, with you, Michael. She, was speaking for a while about, everything that I've done, working 2 jobs, going from getting paid very well as a stockbroker for over 18 years to working at Amazon in a warehouse, and then working at a golf course for $13 an hour. So I was sentenced to a year and a day on September 14th.
So one of the great things about Joseph is that he never stopped asking questions. Okay. All the way through the process, he was never hesitant to ask questions. And those questions resulted in him getting an outcome that worked for him significantly, where they was looking at 40 or 50 months and he ends up with 12 months and a day. But that's not the end. He still has to have questions to say, okay, how do I get to prison? What's going to happen when I'm in prison? What can I do to get out at the soonest possible time? That's a model that I would encourage everybody on the webinar to follow. Make sure you read everything, you learn everything, and come with questions, because that's the way you're going to get a better outcome. Don't wait until you're in prison and we don't have this opportunity to interact. Ask them now. So Joseph, you had mentioned at the start of this webinar that you had a question. What is that question?
Yes, I just want to say one more thing, that I watched every single video on YouTube, listened to every single podcast of you and Justin. The Prison Professor website, I took notes. I mean, I'm sitting at my golf course job now. I have all my notes here. I have the knapsack behind me of everything that I'm going over, because right now I'm becoming a master of, now I'm just learning to become a master of self-advocacy, like you said. For the last week, I've been reading the Disciplinary Code 5270, because now it's all about, like you said, becoming a master of self-advocacy. And I couldn't have done it without you guys. I mean, you navigated, all of you, the whole team, told me exactly what to do, how to do it. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. My question is regards to the CARES Act. So, all right, so I have a year and a day. So after 3 months, I qualify for the CARES Act. And, all of everything that's in your post under the CARES Act 2 days ago applies to me, all 7 bullet points. Do I bring that up to the unit manager? Like, let's say on the 4th month, can I go up to the unit manager and say, if you can please kindly use your discretion for me to possibly move forward to home confinement under CARES?
So that's a great question. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about on today's webinar about, there's an old saying that says, the right decision at the wrong time is the wrong decision. And in a big bureaucracy, that's super important. You've got to be thinking about, when do I pull the lever? And I'm glad that you recognize, Joseph, from the other webinars and the content on Prison Professors, that the CARES Act has very specific guidelines. And you can find those guidelines right under the advocacy page of the website. If you go to the top of the website and you look at resources, and then you'll see before prison, after prison, and then advocacy, or before sentencing, after sentencing, and then advocacy. You can scroll there and you will see the memorandums on the Bureau on the CARES Act itself, which does say that that there are people who have preferential treatment to get to home confinement under the CARES Act at various stages. And those stages are, if you are within 18 months of your release date, then you are eligible for CARES Act placement as soon as you serve 25% of that. If you've served 25% of your sentence, you're eligible to transition to home confinement. If you have more than 18 months until your release date, then the Bureau of Prisons wants you to serve 50% of your sentence. So you don't want to go in there advocating for CARES Act release unless you have a really serious, you don't want to go before that unless you have a really serious health condition. Just this past week, we had a successful outcome for one member of our community who had an 8-month sentence. He used to be on these webinars a lot, and he prepared himself well. And after he had 2 months in, that was 25% of the sentence. So 2 months in, he had 25% of the 8-month sentence served. We submitted the documentation, and he just got notified this past week that the Bureau of Prisons is going to transition him to home confinement to serve the remainder of his 6 months. So the Bureau of Prisons is still doing it. And on an earlier blog this week, I published an article showing that the CDC is anticipating an increase, a spike in COVID again. So you want to definitely be aware of it, but you don't want to ask too soon, Joseph. As soon as you have that 3 months in, if everything's working well, you won't have to do anything. The Bureau of Prisons itself will promote you to come to transition to home confinement, because you're a priority case. You've got, you meet all of the requirements, And it's not really for you. That's what's important to realize. They're not releasing you to home confinement because they want to make things easier on you, but rather it's about protecting the community for staff members, for people in the broader community, by lowering the number of people in congregate living where you could be more exposed to the virus, and it spreads it not only for you or makes you more vulnerable to it, but it makes other people more vulnerable to it. And so we have to remember that. The Bureau of Prisons is supposed to do it. If they don't do it, yes, Joseph, we would like you to submit a formal request to transition to home confinement 3 months, exactly at 3 months. We'll wait 3 months, and then we will submit that request. I'm sure that you will have some documentation before you get there. Have you worked at all yet to prepare the initial request with our team?
For the BP8?
Just the initial request on why you meet the criteria. Have you done that yet?
No.
Okay. So that's something that we're going to want to do. And I will show you on our website where you can kind of find information on that. But of course, our team will give you some guidance as well. So let's go back to the website. Let's see if I can just arrow no. So let me just go back. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. I'm sorry. Or am I sharing my screen? Yeah, I'm sharing my screen. I'm sharing this screen. So if I go to blog here, I know I just wrote something about it this week. There it is right there. I would encourage you to click this CARES Act and COVID. Look at it right here. If you scroll down, you can get the PDF information that you need. Read this article. There's the 7 factors.
Mm-hmm. I have that written down here.
Yeah. So you're going to have that. And all you really have to do, Joseph, is write this information, right? Based on the 7 factors that the director of the Bureau of Prisons authorized. I would like you to consider me as a candidate for release on CARES Act. To serve the remainder of my sentence at home confinement. You might plug in there some of your vulnerabilities to COVID, okay? And you might say something about my weight makes me vulnerable. If you've got any underlying health conditions according to the CDC. Do you have diabetes, Joseph?
I don't.
Do you have any underlying health concerns?
Yes, I had an organ transplant 2 years ago.
Great. So that's what you want to do. You want to weave that information into your request. It's not a complicated matter. It's just self-advocacy. And you put that in writing, and then you, of course, have your family advocate along with you. And that's the path that we are going to take to hopefully succeed and prevail in overcoming some of the Bureau of Prisons things. So that's where the website is, where I produced it and gave some information on a video. But of course,
so what is it submitted to the RRM office? What's that, regional manager?
No, you've got to start inside the Bureau of Prisons. In fact, I should now turn to the formal procedures here of what we were going to cover today, which is case management. And Victoria has her hand up. So I'm going to answer that question as I get into the prepared remarks of the webinar. Joseph, you'll just be patient with me. Victoria, I see your hand up. Can I ask you to unmute yourself so I could respond?
Yes. Hi, Michael. So just to sum up what you're saying, when we go in, we should not mention anything about the CARES Act until we meet the 25%. Unless
you've got a really serious health concern, and it's got to be really serious, and it would have to be something that happened after you were sentenced. And I'll explain to you why as I get through this, but go ahead.
Okay. So until we meet the 25% threshold, then how do we know that the BOP pre-approve us? Is that going to be through the case manager? We're going to find out.
Yes. Let me go through this part of the webinar. Again, that's what I kind of covered in this webinar, and in the chat, I think I have the what do you call it? The PowerPoint that you could follow along. But I'm just gonna just keep that up on the screen right now, and just kind of go through it, because it all starts with understanding case management and unit management, and what is their role, and how do you interact with them? So when you surrender to prison, within 30 days, you are going to have a meeting with the team, okay? The unit team. That unit, that's the policy. Anytime somebody goes to the Bureau of Prisons, within 30 days, you will have what's called a team meeting. And then depending on the sentence length, that team meeting will take place every 3 months, 6 months, or every year for people that have longer sentences. During that team meeting is when you start really sowing the seeds for your self-advocacy. The things that you do at that initial team meeting can set the stage for everything else going forward. So it's important to prepare before you go to prison. And how do you prepare? Well, in fact, that's going to be the subject of next week's webinar with the release plan. My goal for you is that if you're all available on next week's release webinar, you are going to learn what does it mean to put together a good release plan. We provide a template. We also provide a sample. And Joseph worked with another member of our team who created a great template for a release plan, and you could follow that sample. What's always important to remember is how the Bureau of Prisons is going to see you and perceive you. They are not so much concerned with you as an individual as they are with their task at hand, and their task at hand is to carry out the will of the judge. Because the judge said, I hereby sentence you to the custody of the Attorney General, and the Attorney General delegates that to the Bureau of Prisons. So unless something has changed in your life from sentencing, they're going to take for granted that the judge knows everything about you, knew everything about you at sentencing. All of that should have been covered in the pre-sentence investigation report, as Joseph said in the narrative, and they're going to assume the judge took all of that into consideration. So your job throughout is to iterate and to change your life from sentencing. And it's not for me. I'm not the one who's telling you you have to change your life. I'm telling you this is what we learned from leaders, and I'll get into that more in the system. But what you want to do, if you've done your job well, when you surrender to that team meeting, you want to present your release plan in accordance with what the Bureau of Prisons expects as being excellent, and you want to say something along these lines. And remember, we're recording this webinar, so you could just down the link and you don't have to write all of this down because it'll be on the video, but you want to be able to say something along these lines. I did my research before I surrendered to prison, and I saw the importance of a release plan. I know that the unit team is going to give me some guidance on what I should be doing based upon my risk assessment. But what I'd really like to do is show you the work that I've done already with my release plan, and I will keep you apprised of the progress I make every month while I'm serving my sentence. When you do that, what you're effectively accomplishing is you're helping the case manager do the case manager's duty, because the case manager is really striving to advance his or her career. That person, just like anybody else in any other career, they want to get to a higher level. They want to become a unit manager or an associate warden or a warden. And their job description requires them to guide you on release plans. It requires them to assess you with regard to your risk assessment and your needs assessment. And that might not make a lot of sense to you right now because you've never been in the Bureau of Prisons. That's why we really encourage you, learn everything from our website. At the bottom of the web page that accompanies this webinar, I provide links to all of that information. And if you become fluent on it, you could do exactly what Victoria just did. Ask me a question of when you should be advancing these things. But on your first meeting with the unit team, my goal is that you provide them with a copy of your preliminary release plan. And again, that's the subject of next week's webinar. So I wanted you to know about that. The second stage is to understand the staff hierarchy inside the Bureau of Prisons, because the Bureau of Prisons is a huge bureaucracy. It It looks at job titles and descriptions and positions and policy statements, and they don't like to go outside of those job descriptions, policy statements, and program statements, and so on and so forth. In fact, when you go outside of those policy statements and program statements, if you try to reach somebody that they consider it beneath them, they take offense and they can take umbrage at that. And they're not there to help you. So my goal is that you understand who they are. There's an executive staff in every prison. That includes the warden, the executive assistant, the associate wardens. Those are executive staff. There's no reason that you should be talking to them. Although you may be a business leader or a physician or a successful, accomplished person out here in society, and you're used to communicating with decision makers, those people are never going to make a decision of a low level, like deciding when you're going to go home or what program you're going to pursue. They're always going to defer that or delegate that to somebody beneath them on the org chart. So my recommendation during these first 30 days is to really follow the wisdom that Stephen Covey taught in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And that's seek first to understand before you seek to be understood. Don't try to make the whole system understand who you are and why you're better qualified to run the prison and why the prison doesn't operate. Don't tell other people how to do their job. Just go in there and say, I am going to be patient and humble because my only goal is to get out of here as soon as I possibly can. And during those first 30 days at least, I really can't emphasize enough, try to refrain yourself from trying to tell the system what's wrong, because you're going to see a lot of things wrong, a lot. There's going to be disappointment. There's going to be poorly worded memorandums. There's going to be a lot of platitudes that you don't see them carrying out. That's just life in prison. There's going to be people who are patronizing and rude. I'm not talking about people serving sentences. I'm talking about people charged with the responsibility of carrying out those sentences. What we have to do is we have to remember our number one goal. I want to get out of prison as soon as I possibly can. And because of that, I need to refrain or discipline myself and humble myself to just get through this journey in the best way that I can. So especially during the first 30 days, no reason to interact with executive staff, wardens, associate wardens, department heads, or even the unit manager for that matter. Instead, be thinking about your release planning, all of the levers you can pull to get out earlier. And that requires a basic understanding of the, a basic understanding of the prison reform movements that can influence your life. So what are those basic prison reform movements? Well, the first one, of course, is the Second Chance Act. That's the first one that applies to everybody on this webinar. And the Second Chance Act was signed by President Bush 43. But really all that it does is it authorizes the Bureau of Prisons to send somebody to a community confinement center, also known as the halfway house, for up to the last 12 months of the sentence. That's it. That's the law. They can't, even if they want to do more under the Second Chance Act, they cannot give you more than 12 months halfway house. By law, you can't go to halfway house for more than 12 months. But if you have 12 months, you could theoretically get it all. It's not typically the way the Bureau of Prisons operates, but by law, they could allow you to send that whole term in a halfway house. Okay? So it's important to understand that's what you can get under the Second Chance Act. You could also do up to, if your sentence is 60 months or longer, 5 years or longer, you could serve 6 months in a home. You could serve up to the last 6 months of your sentence at home. If your sentence is less than 60 months, by law, you could only serve 10% of your sentence at home. Okay? That's the law under the Second Chance Act. Now, the First Step Act overrides the Second Chance Act. It authorizes the Bureau of Prisons to give you more halfway house time and more home confinement time. And Jonathan, I see your hand up, and I will take it as soon as I finish just these few segments on prison reforms. So First Step Act overrides the Second Chance Act. You can serve way more. You can serve all of your time on home confinement under certain circumstances if the BOP chose to do it. But remember, it's a bureaucracy. It has policies and procedures and guidelines. Your job is to understand those policies, procedures, and guidelines so that you can position yourself for the best possible outcome. And that means understanding as soon as you get there, you want to make sure that you do everything within your power to take the risk assessment survey so you know so the staff qualifies you to earn the earn time credit. Okay, you have to become eligible for the earn time credit. And in order to do that, you have to take the risk assessment, and the staff members need to tell you what you need to do, what courses you need to take. And once you're eligible, they will start providing you with those earned time credits. And in theory, they're supposed to do it every month, and it's supposed to influence either your release date or your eligibility to go to home confinement sooner for more periods of time. There are some people that served on a 5-year sentence, served 1 year in prison, and they served the remainder of their time on home confinement. That didn't happen through either the First Step Act or the Second Chance Act. That happened through the CARES Act, which is still in effect. Okay, it's still in effect. So some people are getting that extra time to transition to home confinement. If you want to learn more about these different rules, I really encourage you, first, watch the webinars that we've covered this, read the video, the web pages that we've covered it, watch our subject matter experts who have spoken about it, learn as much as you can, and then come back with specific questions that I could respond to. And then understand there's this whole 18-month rule, which I believe is not consistent with the will of Congress. It's something that I personally, in my role as, the guy that works on policy for our group, will work to advocate to change that. But right now, that's the rule. So they're not going to allow somebody who they're going to fix a release date at 18 months. And anything above that will transition to going to home confinement, should transition to going to home confinement, but it will not result in an earlier release date. So if you don't understand that, ask that. Also, I would encourage people to learn about executive clemency and how do you qualify? How do you advance a candidacy for commutations? Really, commutations is the main thing, because there's kind of a movement. We just saw President Biden issue an indication that he is going to commute everybody's sentence that is convicted of a marijuana possession. So there are changes that are really good, in my view, in the Bureau of Prisons and in the federal criminal justice system happening. But my view is going to be very different from your view. My view is different because it's predicated on having been in prison for 26 years. Your view is going to be somewhat, you're going to look at everything from the context of, I'm going in and I don't want to go in at all. So, and I understand and respect that. I just want to help you understand, okay, how do I advocate for myself for the best thing? The more you learn, the more we can help architect a strategy that will advance possibilities of getting what you want. And Jonathan, before I move on to the description of the counselor, which is the next slide on my prepared remarks, I'd like to respond to your question. So please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Michael. Just touching on that 10%, if you have a sentence under 60 months, you said 10% at home. Is it 10% of the original sentence? Like I have 48 months. So is that, 10% of that?
Yes, but again, that is only consistent with the Second Chance Act. First Step Act overrides that. So if you've got, and also the RDAP program overrides that. So if you've got, well, no, it doesn't, because if you've got, let's say you have a 3-year sentence, okay, then you could only do 3.6 months on home confinement. You got to do the other part in a halfway house, except for the First Step Act. So yes, that is the law of the Second Chance Act. It is the sentence imposed by the judge, not the time you would get off for going through programs. Does that answer your question?
So how does the First Step Act and RDAP override the Second Chance Act?
Because while you're in prison, you are earning earned time credits, okay? And if you're earning earned time credits and your sentence, let's say your sentence is 24 months, okay, or 22 months, okay? Let's say it's 22 months. If your sentence is 22 months, the maximum amount of time you could go to home confinement is 2.2 months. That's the maximum time you can get for home confinement. But every month that you're in prison, you're still earning these earned time credits. However, they're not going to reduce today. I'm only going with today's rule. They're not going to reduce your sentence length, okay? Those 15 days a month that you may be earning, they're not coming off your sentence. What they're doing is expanding your time that you could spend on home confinement. So let's say that you're in prison and you participated through, let's just say you were there for 8 months. You will have earned 4 months of earned time credits, right? 15 days for every month. That's 4 months. That means you could, let's say that they typically, if you had a 22-month sentence, they would have given you 3 months halfway house or 4 months halfway house. Call it 3 months, probably. Now 4 months. They'd probably give you 4 months. But you've earned 4 more months. So they would take the 4 plus the 4, and you could be on home confinement for 8 months. Can you see how that overrides the Second Chance Act?
Yes.
Okay, that's how it changes it. So was there another question, Jonathan, or can I continue?
No, thank you
Okay.
so much.
Okay, so I see Dusko. That's who you're named as there. Could you please unmute yourself so I could respond to your question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, and my name is Michael. So I'm Michael, and I'm happy to talk with you.
Michael, thank you. Very briefly, I was sentenced to 24 months, which becomes net 20 months. I served exactly 50%, which is 10 months in penitentiary. Was released, I believe, under the First Step Act or to home confinement. And confusion is as earned credits if they apply to your home confinement or not. It seems to be gray area that BOP is not clarifying at the moment.
So are you currently under this segment of being on home confinement, or are you in a halfway house, or where are you now?
I am in home confinement, and I believe that obviously I was released on CARES Act. I'm 70 years old. So you have just stated that any earned time credits do not apply to the reduction of your sentence, meaning reduction of the home confinement time is just ability to go to home confinement. Am I correct?
Yes, but let me share with you that a new development that just happened yesterday, and that's what I was talking about. Is this morning I hired the former director of the Bureau of Prisons to give me his insight. And so I'm going to share my screen to show you. And this is on today's blog. Okay. So if I pull the website up again right here, and I'm going to go up here to the blog, open link in a new tab. I think you should be able to see the blog. It's this blog that I'm talking about.
Thank you.
So in this blog right here, you will see this memo that just came out yesterday.
Perfect.
And I'm going to make it a little bigger and I'm going to read it. And it's a little confusing. So this is typical of the Bureau of Prisons, okay? This came out October the 14th, 2022 from the US DOJ, Federal Bureau of Prisons Reentry Services Division. It went to every halfway house in the country. So if you haven't received it yet, you may receive it. It says, under the First Step Act of 2018, eligible individuals in Bureau of Prisons custody are able to earn and apply time credits toward time off their sentences and or is very important because that's going to depend on the sentence length, and or early placement in pre-release custody. I want to break down that sentence first for those of you who have longer sentences. If you have a longer sentences, you get both time off the sentence and more time in a halfway house. If you have a sentence of like less than 6 years, it's just going to be time off your sentence. If you have a sentence of like less than 2 years, it's only going to be time in pre-release custody. So there's like 3 things I just gave you that are very complicated to understand. But that's what the sentence says, and that's what the law says. But it's not necessarily what the law says as I interpret it, but it's how the BOP is applying it. Okay. So since January of 22, the BOP has been calculating these credits using interim procedures, meaning they had not finalized it yet. They were only using interim procedures. Recently, and I think this just happened at the end of August or early September, recently, the agency moved to a more precise automated calculation, which led to some calculations changing, which impacted some inmates' community placement dates. So clearly they're not using an editor when they're writing these things. This is what I was talking about when I said it's like they're building the plane as they're flying the plane. This is a really poorly worded sentence. It's very difficult to digest and dissect, but it's telling you now there's a new policy that they're using. I wouldn't even call it a policy. There's a new memorandum, and that memorandum is showing them how they're calculating these credits. As of the issuance of this document, individuals already in a community placement, and that includes you, Mr. Desco. So individuals already in community placement or within 2 months of community placement who had received FSA time credit under the interim calculation will not see a change in release date. So that's what's important to say, that you're not going to see a change in your release date. All that's going to happen is whatever you have, you've got to finish that on home confinement according to this memorandum. Now, we could talk about advocacy efforts that you could pursue, but as of right now, this is the rule. So it's important to understand that. And I've shown you where you could go and read it yourself, but I'll tell you what I did after receiving this. So after receiving that memorandum, I told you I hired the director and I said, well, why did the Bureau put forward that memorandum? Are they going to change that whole 18-month rule, which really would have benefited you, Mr. Desco? Because if you served that time in prison, then you've earned time credits. That should come off your sentence, but it didn't. And now it's not going to. So whatever your release date is today, it's going to stay there. Does that make sense to you?
Frankly, it doesn't, but I understand the rule.
Oh, no, it doesn't make sense to me either. It's terrible. And it's unjust, and it's not what Congress intended, but your release date is not going to change. Now, you have an option, of course. How much time do you have on home confinement?
By my calculation, I have 10 months, and I have already spent 5 months. So therefore, I have 5 months to go, even though I have earned easily 5 or 6 months during incarceration. So therefore, yes. I should be done, but it's not going to be.
And so what are your options, right? Here are your options.
Patience.
No, you have options. You could file administrative remedy, but that won't go anywhere. Because you don't have enough time, right? For you have to file a BP 8, 9, 10, and 11. You're going to get rejected at every one of those. And then you could file what's called a habeas petition with your judge, a 2241. And I'm going to be honest with you. There are some people that have done that successfully, where the judge has ordered the Bureau of Prisons to recalculate the earned time credits and apply them every month. I have an article on our website where I've published that, but my advice to you as somebody who went through a quarter century, it's going to cost you a lot of money. I wouldn't do it if it were me. Okay. I wouldn't do it because unless you have a great relationship with your judge and your judge really looks at you as somebody who wants to help, then I wouldn't do it because it's unlikely this is going to change, and it's going to cost you at least 10 grand to file that thing. So I just risk reward. I wouldn't do it personally. So I don't agree with it either. I'm going to advocate for it, but my recommendation is looks like you have a beautiful home there. Enjoy your home and be grateful that you're not in a prison because
thank you for your advice.
Okay, thank you. So I don't see any other hands, so I'm going to continue with the prepared remarks here that I had for the webinar. And I got to go back to I'm not sharing my screen, right? Yeah, I'm not sharing my screen. So let me go back to the section. And I think it's important now to talk about, after now that we've gone through the release planning and the different things that people can do, I want people to be understanding, who are these people you're going to meet in prison? There's going to be a counselor, and the counselor is really, don't expect a counselor to be providing you any counseling, right? This is not a mental health facility that's here to help you. The counselor there exists to assign your bunk where you're going to sleep, approve your visiting lists, assign what job you're going to get, and to coordinate kind of the unit sanitation. And that's about all you're going to see from that counselor. So if you understand that, don't pester the counselor, okay? Understand that's what counselors do in the Bureau of Prisons. You don't want to go to them and complain about the system, because your number one job is to get out of there as soon as you possibly can, and then get to home confinement, and then start advocating for other things, higher levels of liberty, to have more time on rec passes or whatever, right? There's always something we want to be working toward. Just don't think the counselor has any authority to give you anything other than where you sleep, where you work, and who comes to visit you. That's the extent of their authority pretty much in prison. If somebody has a different experience, and I welcome them to hear it, during 26 years of prison, that's what I found to be pretty uniform, regardless of security level where I was held. But the next person on our PowerPoint, the case manager, is very important to you, because it is the case manager's. Remember, I spoke earlier about the different hierarchy within the prison: the executive staff, warden, associate warden, department heads. Those people are always going to defer to the case manager. And the counselor kind of works together in tandem with the case manager, which is why I don't want you to be a pest to the counselor. I want you to just be polite to everybody, to understand what their roles are and what they do, and then figure out, okay, I've got to be thinking about this case manager and making this case manager look like a star. So the case manager will advocate for me to get me the best outcome, whether it's through Second Chance Act, First Step Act, or CARES Act. Regardless of which of those three, your release plan is going to be really influential. Your relationship with staff is going to be really influential to what they recommend. And they have enormous discretion. That's what Congress gave to the Bureau of Prisons, but it's all been delegated down, right? It starts the president signing a bill into law, and then because it's the Department of Justice, it goes to the Attorney General, to the Director of the Bureau of Prisons, to the regional director in the Bureau of Prisons, to the warden of the prison, to the associate warden of programs, to the unit manager, and then to the case manager. That's the delegation chain. And you want to start with the right person in the chain of command, and that's your case manager. So when you're there, that's why I'm asking you, make sure you're on next week's webinar. If you're surrendering to prison or you can't be on next week's webinar, either watch one of the previous ones or read it on the website today, or reach out to whoever it is on our team that you're working with so that you could learn it. Because when you go to prison, I'm really hopeful that you will take the preparatory steps that Joseph took and bring your release plan to your case manager. Also, let your case manager know that you need help, okay? Because you need help, and you want to say, I'd really like to try the risk assessment tool that I've read about so that I can qualify for earned time credits and really learn what the needs assessment, what you recommend I take. That's your job. My job is to try and get you more programs. And that's what I'm doing on this end. And we're advancing in that effort to hopefully bring more programs into the Bureau of Prisons that will qualify you to earn these time credits. Now, and also to advance these different pathways that you have, whether it's to halfway house, home confinement, or early release, depending on which one of those three major prison reform movements we're trying to execute on. Progress reports. Your case manager is going to have to do these progress reports for you either every 3 months, every 6 months, or every year, depending on your sentence length. You want to be a superstar. You want to make sure that you understand that the system requires these iterative progress, right? From sentence, if you haven't been sentenced yet, from the time you came into the system until you get the pre-sentence investigation report, then sentencing. Now you're on the other side of the arc. We described that in our article on the mitigation arc, but now you're on the other side of the arc, and you need to be working on what are you doing since sentencing? Because if you look at our interviews with subject matter experts, and you can find them on the up page of our website, where we've interviewed Chief of U.S. Probation, federal district court judges, the former director of the BOP, former wardens, former halfway house supervisors, all of them say the same thing. In the Department of Justice, we want to see incremental change. That's how they define success in their life. So give them credit for it. Always be saying, thanks to your leadership, I learned that I have to do this or that. Oh, I learned from this class and it was amazing. It really taught me how to walk more effectively and tie my shoes, using both hands. And I follow that procedure now and I'm way more successful. That's the Bureau of Prisons. Don't try to change it until you come home and you're working with our team. For now, just go through the process so that you're not standing out and so that you're in a better position to advocate for yourself. And there's a lot of ways to advocate. Okay. One way that's not very effective is just complaining and say they're terrible. That doesn't move the needle, right? My pathway is to say, okay, I got to understand it. I got to hire the right people to help me understand it. And then I know that there are going to be people that have way more influence than I have. That's why I try to get into the Bureau of Prisons and influence wardens. Because if I can influence how a warden thinks, and what a warden wants to offer to change the culture of the prison, that's going to influence how the director thinks. That could potentially influence how Congress thinks. And so it's this very long tail architecture of trying to bring change. But I also need help from the people in prison to do these things that I am saying so that we can use that as a data point to say, oh, if you create more programs that incentivize a pursuit of excellence, we're going to improve the outcomes of the criminal justice system. And that's what I do. That's why we have a team, because I do that part of the work, which is the scalable part, and other members of our team are trying to do the daily part with you. So if we understand these different channels, that's how we can all work collaboratively together to help people get a better outcome. But I'm urging you, please prepare yourself to expect disappointment in the system, because there's a lot of it. Just like I showed you in those memorandums, just as Mr. Desco just experienced. He says, well, I can see what they're doing. I don't agree with it. That's just part of this journey that you're on, right? We wish that we could have spoken with you many years before you came into the system, but we can't. All we can do is define success here, develop tools, tactics, and resources that we all can use to get a better outcome, and then kind of execute this plan with everybody on the team doing their part. That includes you. If you want members of our team to be able to help you at different stages, you've got to do your part of understanding how this system works so that you're in the best possible position to get the outcome that you want. And we are deeply committed to helping you get that insight. We're deeply committed to trying to influence leadership and stakeholders and judges and legislators. That's what I do. And we send that information both on our website and to people in prison that are members of our community. But I have to leave this with saying, we want you to be both resilient and realistic. Okay. Let's understand, whatever the Bureau of Prisons does, there's always going to be a response that we can take. No matter what, there's always a response. We have to choose the most effective response. And we have to understand there are always going to be challenges. There are always going to be problems. And, I have no doubt that as you involuntarily came into this system, you heard from defense attorneys that told you what was going to happen, and maybe you got disappointed, or you heard from probation officers or the U.S. attorney. Whatever happened, happened. And we can't change any of that in the past. All we can do is share, this is what we learned from having gone through the system. And this is the way that we worked to master that system. And this is why we believe in it. And we want to help you. And we're committed to helping you. I would never ask anybody to do anything I didn't do in prison and that I'm not still doing today. You can see, I'll share my screen just to show you. Every day I'm telling you, hey, you have to be advocating for yourself. You have to be documenting your story. And if I show you this screen right here, you can see how still every day I am documenting all the work that we're doing. This is every day I'm creating new stuff that I'm going to use as what? A tool, tactic, and resource that I'm going to use to try and improve outcomes of this system. So I'm documenting stuff every day because I believe it's really important for me to influence other people, stakeholders that I hope will help members of our community. I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. We create all kinds of workbooks for people. We create journal books where you could document your story. All of that is available on our website. And we create them in this way for a very specific reason, as workbooks, as specific reasons, because we know that the Bureau of Prisons will not allow you to just get a book with blank pages like this. You can't, the BOP would not allow this into the institution, just a document with blank pages. So this kind of book, I use it every day to write notes on what I am doing. You should be doing that too in prison, but the BOP doesn't allow it. That's why we produce these workbooks that have lessons in them, and then they have blank pages in them. And the whole idea, the whole concept of this is when you get out of prison, as you're going through these different stages, you're influencing these stakeholders along the way. You are showing them how you are taking an iterative approach to prepare for a better outcome. That's how you say, okay, I understand the system. I understand what I have to do in the system to get the best possible outcome. And that's really what we want to convey. We also want to convey, be like Joseph, be like the people that ask us questions so that we could respond to you, so that you feel better prepared when you're going into that system. So that's what concludes my prepared remarks for today's webinar. I am going to scroll through the question. I will ask Justin, are you on the webinar right now still? I see your face, but I don't know if you're here. If you're here, would you unmute yourself? Let me just send him a text. Oh,
forgive me. I'm here. I was trying to unmute it.
Justin, if you could, you might want to populate the webinar with additional content that I left out, because sometimes I speak too fast or something. So if I left some things out, why don't you just share some things you've learned? If you don't have something to share, you might tell them about that poor member of our team that just got a disciplinary infraction, which is really going to hurt things.
So a couple of insights.
I'm going to read while you're doing that. I'm going to read through the chat.
Okay. And I think I responded to as many questions or all of them. The one thing I want to stress: you look at the end of your sentence. If it's 8 months, 2 years, 3 years, and you can kind of assess, well, potentially how many meetings will you have with a case manager? And we know at times judges, case managers can be cynical. In other words, you tell them exactly what they expect to hear. So that first team meeting, rather than go in and lay it on thick, and I know Michael addressed this, lay it on thick and tell them everything that they want to hear, you can lay out the agenda of what you plan to do in the coming months. So then when you go back for that next team meeting, you can actually show them what you have done over the last few months. Michael is publishing terrific book reports on YouTube. Well, that's a great idea in your reentry plan. What books are you reading? Why are they helping you? How will they help you prepare when you come home? Not just going through programming, but how is the programming helping you? Then at that next team meeting, you have more information to share with them rather than just promises of what you're planning to do. So I just really encourage you to sow seeds when you're going in for these meeting with these case managers. And also, yes, unfortunately, someone in our community had a struggle with the disciplinary infraction. She had an appointment at 7:30 to report to medical, as I understand it. I also understood that she can only shop in the commissary once a week and for an hour. And she was going to the medical appointment and they said, they're not here yet. She's like, okay, I'm going to go to the commissary. She went back. They're not there yet. Then they're like, oh, you're not going to have your appointment today. So she went back to commissary. And as it turned out, she was written up for a disciplinary infraction for missing that appointment. And it's very frustrating And now she's managing through the fallout. So none of you would ever do anything intentionally. But in this case, it wasn't something like phone or not doing her job. Those are obvious disciplinary infractions. This was, I had an appointment, no one was there. Hey, I'll just go get my shopping in the commissary in, and there are consequences that follow. So you've just got to understand this environment and recognize if you have an appointment, you have an appointment. Even if they don't show up, you have an appointment. And if that means you missed the commissary shopping that week, that just means you're going to be eaten in the chow hall that week. And these are things we want to convey. It's uncomfortable at times. It is imprisonment. We just want you to think every decision through, because the consequences are very
You're breaking up,
terrible or
Justin.
awful, but there's a consequence here. Well, we just want you to think about these things. Thank you.
So thanks, Justin. I think that concludes our prepared remarks. If anybody has questions, there's Victoria's, because this is the time to ask them. I did read through all the chat. It looks like Justin responded to everybody. But if anybody feels they didn't get their question answered about anything, even what we didn't cover today, this is the time for us to talk. So Victoria, hi, go ahead and unmute yourself so I can respond to your question.
Yes. So, Michael, this is my last webinar. I'm going in on Monday.
Okay, how are you feeling, Victoria? I know you're scared.
I don't know.
How is it?
A little bit scared, but I think I'm okay.
Yeah, I want you to know that you're going to get through this. This is the time when you're like you've dropped into the pit and now you can start climbing out. You know, you've been on these webinars for a long time. You've heard a lot. You've read a lot. I know you've worked on your release plan, and I'm confident you're going to have a successful outcome, and you can expect that we will be keeping you apprised of what's changing in the system all the way through. But what's your question?
Yes, thank you. So a quick question. I'm running through a checklist just to make sure I don't miss anything on Monday, like on what I'm going to bring on Monday or what I should bring on Monday. So one, I should bring my driver license, not my actual driver license, or should I just bring a copy of my driver license?
Yeah, just a copy is fine.
Just a copy of my driver's. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I should bring my vaccination card.
Yes,
COVID
that's
vaccination
definite.
card.
Yes, bring that.
Okay. I should bring my some money.
I would have, better than you bringing money, I would have somebody. How are you going to get to the prison?
Is someone going to drop me off?
So could that person go to Western Union a few hours after they drop you off and send it through Western Union?
Yes,
Victoria?
of course.
That's
Yes.
way better than bringing you the money, because the
Okay.
less interaction. So that's not their policies to accept money.
Okay.
And since it's not their policy, you could ask them to do it, but some of them are lazy. Some of them will say no, and they'll make you send it home. Some of
Okay.
them may put it into the process, and they may not put it on your books or in your account for several days, in which case you can't access it. So the best thing to do is to send money through Western Union. And we have a video on our site. I'm going to drop the link. I see Justin already tapped
Yes,
it.
Justin.
I
dropped
put
it.
a link in, and I also really encourage you to watch our top 10 tips to surrendering. And it's not boilerplate stuff, but it's really good stuff about what you do when you get there and throughout the journey. So there's a top tips to surrendering to prison. I'll grab the link and I'll put it in this chat. But before you go in, I really encourage you to go through that whole. It'll take some time, but it's well worth it. Please do that before you go in on Monday.
Yeah,
Okay,
she's been
yes,
very active on her webinar, so I know she's going to be great.
I think I went through it, but yes, I will find time to go through that again, just because I went through that quite a while ago. So then with the contact list, I should
Anyone that will
mail
ever
that
go into
to
prison.
myself.
Well done on doing that. That's excellent.
So a contact list, I should mail it to myself, right?
Yes, that's a
Send it.
good idea. Mail the contact list to yourself, and I would put that in the mail today, because
Okay.
if you put that in the mail today, it'll get to you by like Tuesday or Wednesday, and that's when you'll start getting mail in there. But also bring a copy with you.
Okay, and bring a copy.
Yeah, just put it on one piece of paper, typed, black ink. That's it.
Okay. And then should I bring also a copy of my release plan?
Yes, I
draft
would
that in.
also bring that copy in on pieces of paper, but I would also send that to yourself today as well,
Also mail it to myself. Okay.
because you don't need to give it to your team until for the next 30 days, but send it to yourself today. And remember, I've published information on mail. Some prisons, they've got the most crazy rules. I think in last week's webinar, I had the links to the Mail article. Make sure that it's only printed on one page and make sure there's no colored ink on the paper and it's white paper with black ink.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And
Okay.
then, so I'm working on building up a website. Is that something that should I print out on my preliminary website with
You
me?
have a
or is that
website, you've built a website like Joseph. Is that what you said?
not as pretty as Joseph, but it's on the work.
That's okay. Look, all you're doing is documenting your journey. That's what's important. Document your journey, because this is going to be like your marketing plan to help you all the way through, not only in prison, but when you're on supervised release as well. And that's just as important, right? We've got to be advocating for ourselves every stage of the way so that you could be an entrepreneur, so that you could rebuild your life. And the more you can show your work, the better off you're going to be.
Okay. Is that something that I should mention to the case manager, or should I print it out to bring it with me, or what should I do?
I don't think it's
do I
so.
need permission?
Remember that you are having to build an iterative story. So like, if you bring your release plan the first day, that's all I would give them the first time, because the next time you go, you want to have something new and say, I've been doing this as well. So I would save that for the next team meeting.
Okay.
I mean, you don't have
Is there
that many
anything
team
else that
meetings. So you don't have that many team meetings. You're going to be out pretty soon. So you may only have 2 team meetings during your whole time. If everything
that's
works
it?
out well,
Okay.
you'll be out. So the second meeting, I want it to be different from something else.
Okay. So when you say team meeting, is this like me with the counselor, or not with counselor? What's
The case manager.
the case manager, right?
Yeah, that's the case manager meeting. I see that Brian gave some good information that anytime you meet with one of those people, you make sure you ask them, is this my team meeting?
Okay.
Because that's when I want you to give it to them.
Okay.
But also, Victoria, you're going to find some friends in there, okay? When you get there on Monday, by Monday night, there will be some people that are going to help you along the journey, help you along the way. And just
Okay.
that they're going to tell you to expect in that prison.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Is there anything else that I'm missing, Michael? Is there anything
No,
else
I think that you're
I should
wonderful.
bring?
You're wonderfully well prepared. And I hope that helps you restore confidence as you go through this difficult time. But as somebody who went through it, I'm going to tell you it's going to get better. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you. Bye-bye. And we look forward to hearing from you when you come home. Okay. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Okay. So I
Hey,
see.
Michael, I just had a quick question. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So Victoria mentioned her vaccination card. I've never been vaccinated. I chose not to get vaccinated. I've had COVID about 3 times. Does it help or hurt you to have been vaccinated as far as placement, maybe getting out early, going to a halfway house, getting home incarceration? Is there any indifference made whether you're vaccinated or not?
So I would encourage you to watch on our subject matter expert page, because I can tell you what my thoughts are, but I always want you to also get the authority figure as well. So if you go to our subject matter expert page and you see that the interview that I did with Scott Findley, who's a former warden, he specifically said there is no discrimination against somebody whether they're vaccinated or not vaccinated. Okay. So he said that already. The only thing they're going to look at is if you have COVID, they're going to test you. Now that's what he said, but we can also tell you what we have experienced. And I can see my wife walked into the room. So why don't you come over here and give me the update? Because I don't do one-on-one stuff. Other members of our team do, and my wife knows a lot. So I'm going to ask her, what have you heard regarding people who've gone in that are not vaccinated? I know you're going to tell me about Chuck, who said, or somebody else.
Being that not about knowing what rule and then using that as ammunition to advocate.
I just want to be as cooperative
and get home to my children as quickly.
Yeah, of course you do. We understand that, and that's what we want as well. But we don't want to
get vaccinated. Yeah. I mean,
they're not supposed to do that. Okay. But that's the Bureau of Prisons. So I want you to make your own decision. Whatever you decide, our team is here to help. Okay. And I can tell you that we just have the guy that just got notified this past week, that's going to go home on CARES. He's not vaccinated. They tried to say no. As Carol said, we advocated on his behalf and we prevailed, and we're grateful. But they're not supposed to do it, but they're not supposed to do a lot of things, and they do. So you make a decision. We're here on your team. Okay.
Thank you.
What is your name?
It's Robert. We've spoken a couple of times.
Yeah.
I've been on several webinars.
All right, good. All right, best of luck to you.
Thank you.
I see Mr. Dusko again. You got to unmute yourself, Mr. Dusko. Your hands up. Mr. Dusko, I can't hear you. Could you unmute yourself?
Can you hear me now?
I do hear you now.
Very briefly, for benefit of everybody that is getting ready to go in, I do want to compliment you. Preparation is 99% savior. I did not do that. I did not join your group when I came out. Just recently started listening to you guys. I urge everybody that goes in. It's tough. It's hard. 2 or 3 comments, if you don't mind, I will make for benefit of everybody else, which you reiterate over and over and over. Number one, your lawyers are probably done with their expertise by the time you finish your trial. There's very little that many of them can offer. Number 2, lack of information, which is sort of generic in BOP, is the enemy. So more you can learn and prepare yourself and be properly informed, your journey will be easier, because you really don't get information once you're in there. Next one is, don't be a prison attorney. Many guys try to do and chase the justice. There's no justice. Just get out of it. Just stay positive, read, exercise. Think of it as an ashram. I did. I lost weight. I exercised a lot. My blood pressure got better. Think about yourself. Think about getting out. Do all the right things that you believe it's right. Tell them what they want to hear. Many of us get into the bitter and angry stages. They're not healthy. Stay on a positive side. Read, exercise. It's the best therapy there is. But in a final conclusion is truly prepare yourself, because all of us go in relatively unprepared. And I do thank you guys for doing what you're doing. I think you're doing a terrific job. Thank you.
We're doing the best that we can, and we appreciate you for being a member of our community. Scott, I see that you've got your hand up. Why don't you contribute?
I just wanted to respond to Robert, if he's still here. Based on my experience at Big Spring, Texas, I was at the camp regarding COVID vaccination. The people at the camp where I was, if you were unvaccinated, you went to quarantine when you arrived, which I believe now is 5 days. And depending on where and how the quarantine unit is set up, you may not have access to phones or any sort of communication with your family. And so those first few days, especially if you have children, might be important for you to be able to communicate with them. So you might want to go ahead and get vaccinated, if you want to take that into consideration. Also, at my unit, when people were transitioning into home confinement, once again, if you weren't vaccinated, you spent the last few days at the unit in quarantine before they would allow you to go to home confinement. So it's not affecting the time that you're there, but quarantine is not set up the same as the regular unit. You may or may not have computers, you may or may not have phones. So that ability to email or communicate with your loved ones might be restricted.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank you very much, everybody, for participating today. I have a 10 o'clock call, which is in 2 minutes, so I've got to stop right now. But next week's webinar is going to be on the release plan. We will give extensive information, and we appreciate all of you. This is going to be already on the blog, but it'll be a second version. Thank you again for being with us, and best of luck to everybody. Have a great weekend. Thank you.